A BRICS country insider reveals the realities of the alliance. We received a very hot comment on one of our videos, so I'm going to read this comment to you and we analyze this together. Let's do this. Fabio says, totally agree with you. I'm from a BRICS country. I've worked as expat in 2 of the other member countries for quite a few years, and I perceive pretty much the same points. It goes on. It is an alliance of convenience. Lots of hype spread out by Jinhua and their captive media. And this is true for most likely every country on the planet. Like, each country defends its own interests, right? Each country promotes its own interests. That's just how the world works. You know, you're probably never going to see a country criticizing its own decisions. It might happen after history played out that the new leaders might say, hey, you know what past leaders did about this and that might not be so good. Or you see it when people run for office, which is again a different story, but a person himself, herself, criticizing his or her own actions is just not that common. He goes on, many YouTubers swallowed the bait and seem to be just replicating Chinese propaganda, if not getting paid to do it. Go figure. Now, this is the strongest point here. If you have ever wondered why some people are so in favor of BRICS, are so in favor of the East, it's typically because they have financial interests. They are part of this pot as much as the leaders in the East are part of it. They have invested interest in these countries, so chances of them spreading any sort of negative wording on this alliance will likely not happen. They are in it for the cash. They want the cash. And they will do everything and anything to defend their turf. Now think about this. This is like a drug dealer defending his or her turf, like a cartel. It's kind of like the same. You know, it sounds odd, it sounds brutal. It is what it is. He goes on, it is quite fragile, for as you mentioned, there are conflicting interests, especially among the 3 major powers. And how we can see that the 3 major powers don't really trust each other. And the 3 major powers, Russia, China, and India. Just look at China's and India's relationship. It's everything but good. It just isn't, you know, and you can talk to people from India and ask them what they think about people from mainland China or what they think about the CCP. Go ahead, ask 100 people if they're in favor of them or not, and you might be surprised. If you think now that they're in favor of them, you might be surprised by some of the answers you get to hear. But the strongest point here is that if these countries really trusted each other, and if they wanted the best for their own citizens, they would say, hey, you know what? A citizen of India can move to China and get the full package of liberty, full reciprocity and civil and property rights. They would allow Indians to go to China, buy property, own companies, become citizens. That's not on offer. China's not doing that. There's no unity. Western countries are offering the full package of reciprocity, even to countries that don't give it to us. Now let that sink in for a moment. Is that fair? Think about that. If you're from an Eastern country, you can come to the West and get the full package of reciprocity and civil and property rights, plus a ton of benefits. I mean, this is insane, if you really think about it. And when you as a Westerner go there, even if you come with a lot of cash, you cannot become a citizen, you cannot own a company, you cannot buy property, you cannot get real unconditional permanent residency, then the question is, what the hell are you doing in those countries? Because you're being milked. You're being milked by those countries, you know? That's not even just people from the West going to the East. That's even people from Eastern countries going to other Eastern countries. They also don't get the reciprocity and civil and property rights. Their own countries aren't offering it, and the countries they're moving to are also not offering it. So it's kind of fair for them because their home countries, right, their country of citizenship doesn't offer it to the country where they're living in. But for a person that comes from a country where this is guaranteed by the Constitution, you know, you sit back and you wonder, are we really living in the 21st century or are we still living in the Stone Age? He goes on, he says, Brazil and South Africa are going through unprecedented political and social instability. Very true. I just recently spoke to an Australian, well, now he's an Australian citizen, but he used to live in South Africa. He moved from South Africa to Australia for the simple reason that a lot of things happened in South Africa. You know, there was a lot of discrimination at his work against white people. It truly happened. And he left. He couldn't take it anymore. He left and he moved to Australia. And now he's having huge problems in Australia because of what happened during the past crisis. So many people are getting out of Australia. They're looking for a second residency, dual citizenship, And who can blame them, right? They have a valid reason to get out of those countries. Then he goes on, there's no overall minimum trust among the countries, much less infrastructure to implement a gold-backed common currency. I believe it when I see it. For the time being, I see it as propaganda to try destabilizing the Western economies. And so I personally encourage all of my Western followers to leave Eastern countries for good and come back to the West, where you can own property, where you're treated equally and fairly, where you can own land, where you can own companies, where you have citizenship, where you have basic rights, all rights, right? Where rights are guaranteed by the Constitution. Forget about these countries. These countries, they don't want you. They don't want your ass there. If they wanted your ass there, they would be giving you a lot more value than they're giving you. The fish rots from the head down. Remember this quote. It's been passed on to me by a very close personal friend. The fish rots from the head down. If the leadership of a country sucks, then you know what's going to happen to everyone below the leadership, the top guys. Now he says, for some reason, one does not see Western MSM showing China's problems. The floods, the rampant unemployment, the flow of industries towards their neighbors and even towards Latin America. He says, I'm old enough to remember the military government of Argentina trying to raise an external question in order to reunite their people. Their misfortune was to bump against a lady called Margaret. The military government went down right after the war. They lost. Fabio, if you want to tell us what country you're from, would appreciate it. This comment here is by a guy who really knows his stuff and who is not shy to share it. This is a great comment, and it was written thoughtfully. And that's important. When you want to establish yourself in a new country, you gotta have the basic package of liberty. And there's so many people. There was another clown that made a video about democracies or monarchies and probably hasn't even lived in a monarchy for long enough to even be able to tell the difference. You know, he hasn't really experienced the highs and the lows. It's easy to say that if you're vacationing in a country, but having lived in a country for 5 to 10 years is a different story. And that permanently, not just vacationing, not just hanging out for a couple of weeks, couple of months. So you're really having lived in the country, having purchased property, paid taxes, formed a company, purchased assets. If you haven't done that, then you haven't really lived in a country anyway. You're just spreading what you think will come to fruition or what you've heard from somebody else, but you haven't really lived that. You know, you aren't eating your own cookie. If you aren't eating your own cookie, then your portrayed wisdom isn't worth much at all. And you should probably stay away from talking about certain subjects until you've accumulated enough experience for you to tell others. And unfortunately, this is a big component that is missing in many people today for a number of reasons, right? They're in it for the money, they're in it for the greed, they're in it for influence, but they have really not much idea. You know, they don't understand geopolitics, they don't understand history. I think you need to have a keen desire to learn history and to listen to different perspectives, and especially listening to the people who have gone for this is a true asset. And if you can do that, I think like you can excel and you can see things that other people don't know exist, and you can keep yourself out of trouble, and you can make much better decisions going forward. What's your take on the BRICS collaboration alliance? Post your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.